Carlos Castaneda's The Teachings of Don Juan, A Yaqui Way of Knowledge. Part 1, The Teachings, Chapter 5. Don Juan inquired periodically in a casual way about the state of my datura plant. In the year that had elapsed from the time I replanted the root, the plant had grown into a large bush. It had seeded and the seed pods had dried, and Don Juan judged it was time for me to learn more about the devil's weed. Sunday, January 27th, 1963. Today, Don Juan gave me the preliminary information on the second portion of the datura plant, datura root. The second step in learning the tradition. He said the second portion of the root was the real beginning of learning. In comparison with it, the first portion was like child's play. The second portion had to be mastered. It had to be intaken at least 20 times, he said, before one could go on to the third step. I asked, what does the second portion do? The second portion of the devil's weed is used for seeing. With it, a man can soar through the air to see what is going on at any place he chooses. Can a man actually fly through the air, Don Juan? Why not? As I have already told you, the devil's weed is for those who seek power. The man who masters the second portion can use the devil's weed to do unimaginable things, to gain more power. What kind of things, Don Juan? I can't tell you that. Every man is different. Monday, January 28th, 1963. Don Juan said, if you complete the second step successfully, I can show you only one more step in the course of learning about the devil's weed. I realized she was not for me, and I did not pursue her path any further. What made you decide against it, Don Juan? The devil's weed nearly killed me every time I tried to use her. Once it was so bad I thought I was finished, and yet I could have avoided all that pain. How? Is there a special way to avoid pain? Yes, there is a way. It is a formula. Is it a formula, a procedure, or what? It is a way of grabbing onto things. For instance, when I was learning about the devil's weed, I was too eager. I grabbed onto things the way kids grab onto candy. The devil's weed is only one of a million paths. Anything is one of a million paths. Therefore, you must always keep in mind that a path is only a path. If you feel you should not follow it, you must not stay with it under any condition. To have such clarity, you must lead a disciplined life. Only then will you know that any path is only a path, and there is no affront to oneself or to others in dropping it if that is what your heart tells you to do. But your decision to keep on the path or to leave it must be free of fear or ambition. I warn you, look at every path closely and deliberately. Try it as many times as you think necessary. This question is one that only a very old man asks. My benefactor told me about it once when I was young, and my blood was too vigorous for me to understand it. Now I do understand it, and I will tell you what it is. Does this path have a heart? All paths are the same. They lead nowhere. They are paths going through the bush or into the bush. In my own life, I could say that I have traversed long, long paths, but I am not anywhere. My benefactor's question has a meaning now. Does this path have a heart? If it does, the path is good. If it doesn't, it is one of no use. Both paths lead nowhere, but one has a heart, the other doesn't. One makes for a joyful journey as long as you follow it. You are one with it. The other will make you curse your life. One makes you strong, the other weakens you. Sunday, April 21st, 1963. On Tuesday afternoon, April 16th, Don Juan and I went to the hills where his datura plants are. He asked me to leave him alone there and wait for him in the car. He returned nearly 3 hours later carrying a package wrapped in red cloth. As we started to drive back to his house, he pointed to the bundle and said it was his last gift for me. I asked if he meant he was not going to teach me anymore. He explained that he was referring to the fact that I had a plant fully mature and would no longer need his plants. Late in the afternoon, we sat in his room. He brought out a smoothly finished mortar and pestle. The bowl of the mortar was about 6 inches in diameter. He untied a large package full of small bundles, selected 2 of them, and placed them on a straw mat to my side. Then he added 4 more bundles of the same size from the pack he had carried home. He said they were seeds, and I had to grind them into a fine powder. He opened the first bundle and poured some of its contents into the mortar. The seeds were dried, round, and caramel yellow in color. I began working with the pestle, and after a while he corrected me. He told me to push the pestle against one side of the mortar first, and then slide it across the bottom up against the other side. I asked him what he was going to do with the powder. He did not want to talk about it. The first batch of seeds was extremely hard to grind. It took me 4 hours to finish the job. My back ached because of the position in which I had been sitting. I lay down and wanted to go to sleep right there, but Don Juan opened the next bag and poured some of the contents into the mortar. The seeds this time were slightly darker than the first ones. They were lumped together. The rest of the bag's contents was a sort of powder made of a very small, round, dark granules. I wanted something to eat, but Don Juan said that if I wished to learn, I had to follow the rule, and the rule was that I could only drink a little water while learning the secrets of the second portion. The third bag contained a handful of live black grain weevils, and in the last bag were some fresh white seeds, almost mushy soft, but fibrous and difficult to grind into a fine paste, as he expected me to do. After I had finished grinding the contents of the 4 bags, Don Juan measured 2 cups of greenish water, poured it into a clay pot, and put the pot on the fire. When the water was boiling, he added the first batch of powdered seeds. He stirred it in with a long pointed piece of wood or bone which he carried in his leather pouch. As soon as the water boiled again, he added the other substances, one by one, following the same procedure. Then he added 1 more cup of the same water and let the mixture simmer over a low fire. Then he told me it was time to mash the root. He carefully extracted a long piece of datura root from the bundle he had carried home. The root was about 16 inches long. It was thick, perhaps 1.5 inches in diameter. He said it was the second portion. And again he had measured the second portion himself because it was still his root. He said the next time I tried the devil's weed, I would have to measure my own root. He pushed the big mortar toward me, and I proceeded to pound the root in exactly the same way he had mashed the first portion. He directed me through the same steps, and again we left the mashed root soaking in water, exposed to the night air. By that time, the boiling mixture had solidified in the clay pot. Don Juan took the pot from the fire, placed it inside a hanging net, and hooked it to a beam in the middle of the room. At about 8 o'clock in the morning of April 17th, Don Juan and I began to leach the root extract from the water. It was a clear sunny day, and Don Juan interpreted the fine weather as an omen that the devil's weed liked me. He said that with me around, he could remember only how bad she had been with him. The procedure we followed in leaching the root extract was the same I had observed for the first portion. By late in the afternoon, after pouring out the top water for the 8th time, there was a spoonful of a yellowish substance in the bottom of the bowl. We returned to his room, where there were still 2 little sacks he had not touched. He opened one, slid his hand inside, and wrinkled the open end around his wrist with the other hand. He seemed to be holding something, judging by the way his hand moved inside the bag. Suddenly, with a swift movement, he peeled the bag off his hand like a glove, turning it inside out, and shoved his hand close to my face. He was holding a lizard. Its head was a few inches from my eyes. There was something strange about the lizard's mouth. I gazed at it for a moment, and then recoiled involuntarily. The lizard's mouth was sewed up with rude stitches. Don Juan ordered me to hold the lizard in my left hand. I clutched it. It wriggled against my palm. I felt nauseated. My hands began to perspire. He took the last bag and repeated the same motions. He extracted another lizard. He also held it close to my face. I saw that its eyelids were sewed shut. He ordered me to hold his lizard in my right hand. By the time I had both lizards in my hands, I was almost sick. I had an overpowering desire to drop them and get out of there. "Don't squeeze them," he said. His voice brought me to a sense of relief and direction. He asked me what was wrong with me. He tried to be serious, but he couldn't keep a straight face and laughed. I tried to ease my grip, but my hands were sweating so profusely that the lizards began to wriggle out of them. Their sharp little claws scratched my hand, producing an incredible feeling of disgust and nausea. I closed my eyes and clenched my teeth. One of the lizards was already sliding onto my wrist. All it needed was to yank its head from between my fingers to be free. I had a peculiar sensation of physical despair, of supreme discomfort. I growled at Don Juan between my teeth to take the damn things off me. My head shook involuntarily. He looked at me curiously. I growled like a bear, shaking my body. He dropped the lizards into their bags and began to laugh. I wanted to laugh also, but my stomach was upset. I lay down. I explained to him that what had affected me was the sensation of their claws on my palms. He said there were lots of things that could drive a man mad, especially if he did not have the resolution, the purpose required for learning. But when a man had a clear, unbending intent, feelings were in no way a hindrance, for he was capable of controlling them. Don Juan waited a while, then going through the same motions, handed me the lizards again. He told me to hold their heads up and rub them softly against my temples. As I asked them anything I wanted to know. I did not understand at first what he wanted me to do. He told me again to ask the lizards about anything I could not find out for myself. He gave me a whole series of examples. I could find out about persons I did not see ordinarily, or about objects that were lost, or about places I had not seen. Then I realized he was talking about divination. I got very excited. My heart began to pound. I felt that I was losing my breath. He warned me not to ask about personal matters this first time. He said I should think rather of something that had nothing to do with me. I had to think fast and clearly because there was no way of reversing my thoughts. I tried frantically to think of something I wanted to know. Don Juan urged me on imperilously. All right. And I was astonished to realize I could think of nothing I wanted to ask the lizards. After a painful long wait, I thought of something. Sometime earlier, a large number of books had been stolen from a reading room. It was not a personal matter, and yet I was interested in it. I had no preconceived idea about the identity of the person or persons who had taken the books. I rubbed the lizards against my temples, asking them who the thief was. After a while, Don Juan put the lizards inside their bags and said that there were no deep secrets about the root and the paste. Let me get that again. After a while, Don Juan put the lizards inside their bag and said there were no deep secrets about the root and the paste. The paste was made to give direction. The root made things clear. But the real mystery was the lizards. They were the secret of the whole sorcery of the second portion, he said. I asked whether they were a special kind of lizard. He said they were. They had to come from an area of one's own plant. They had to be one's friend. And to have lizards as friends, he said, required a long period of grooming. One had to develop a strong friendship with them by giving them food and speaking kind words to them. I asked why their friendship was so important. He said the lizards would allow themselves to be caught only if they knew the man, and whoever took the devil's weed seriously had to treat the lizards seriously. He said that as a rule, the lizards should be caught after the paste and the root had been prepared. They should be caught in the late afternoon. If one was not on intimate terms with the lizards, he said, days could be spent trying to catch them without success, and the paste lasts only one day. He then gave me a long series of instructions concerning the procedure to follow after the lizards had been caught. Once you have caught the lizards, put them in a separate bag. Then take the first one and talk to her. Apologize for hurting her and beg her to help you. And with a wooden needle, sew up her mouth. Use the fibers of the agave and one of the thorns of the choya to do the sewing. Draw the stitches tight. Then tell the other lizards the same thing and sew her eyelids together. By the time night begins to fall, you will be ready. Take the lizards with the sewed-up mouth and explain to her the matter you want to know about. Ask her to go and see for you, and tell her you had to sew up her mouth so she would hurry back and not talk to anyone else. Let her scramble in the paste after you have rubbed it on her head. Then put her on the ground. If she goes in the direction of your good fortune, the sorcery will be successful and easy. If she goes in the opposite direction, it will be unsuccessful. If the lizard moves towards you, the south, you can expect more than ordinary good luck. But if she moves away from you, the north, the sorcery will be terribly difficult. You may even die. So if she moves away from you, that is a good time to quit. At this point, you can make the decision to quit. If you do, you will lose your capacity to command the lizards. But that is better than losing your life. On the other hand, you may decide to go ahead with the sorcery in spite of my warning. If you do, the next step is to take the other lizard and tell her to listen to her sister's story and then describe it to you. How can the lizard with the sewed-up mouth tell me what she sees? Wasn't her mouth closed to prevent her from talking? Sewing up her mouth prevents her from telling her story to strangers. People say lizards are talkative. They will stop anywhere to talk. Anyway, the next step is to smear the paste on the back of her head and then rub her head against your right temple, keeping the paste away from the center of your forehead. At the beginning of your learning, it is a good idea to tie the lizard by its middle to your right shoulder with a string. Then you won't lose her or injure her. But as you progress and become more familiar with the power of the devil's weed, the lizards learn to obey your commands and will stay perched on your shoulder. After you have smeared the paste on your right temple, when the with the lizard, dip the fingers of both hands into the gruel. First, rub it on both temples, then spread it all over both sides of your head. The paste dries very fast and can be applied as many times as necessary. Begin every time by using the lizard's head first, then your fingers. Sooner or later, the lizard that went to sea comes back and tells her sister all about her journey, and the blind lizard describes it to you as though you were her kind. When the sorcery is finished, put the lizard down and let her go, but don't watch where she goes. Dig a deep hole with your bare hands and bury everything you used in it. About 6 p.m., Don Juan scooped the root extract out of the bowl onto a flat piece of shale. There was less than a teaspoon of the yellowish starch. He put it into a cup and added some yellowish water. He rotated the cup in his hand to dissolve the substance. He handed me the cup and told me to drink the mixture. It was tasteless, but it left a slightly bitter flavor in my mouth. The water was too hot, and that annoyed me. My heart began to pound fast, and soon I was relaxed again. Don Juan got the other bowl with the paste. The paste looked solid and had a glossy surface. I tried to poke the crust with my finger, but Don Juan jumped toward me and pushed my hand away from the bowl. He became very annoyed. He said that it was very thoughtless of me to try that, and if I really wanted to learn, there was no need to be careless. This was power, he said, pointing to the paste, and nobody could tell what kind of power it really was. It was bad enough that we had to tamper with it for our own purposes, a thing we cannot help doing because we are men, he said, but we should at least treat it with the proper respect. The mixture looked like oatmeal. Apparently it had enough starch to give it that consistency. He asked me to get the bags with the lizards. He took the lizards with the sewed-up mouth and carefully handed it over to me. He made me take it with my left hand and told me to get some of the paste with my fingers and rub it on the lizard's head, and then put the lizard into the pot and hold it there until the paste covered its entire body. Then he told me to remove the lizard from the pot. He picked up the pot and led me to a rocky area not too far from his house. He pointed to a large rock and told me to sit in front of it as if it were my datura plant, and holding the lizard in front of my face, to explain to her again what I wanted to know, and beg her to go and find the answer for me. He advised me to tell the lizard I was sorry I had caused her discomfort, and to promise her that I would be kind to all lizards in return. Then he told me to hold her between the third and fourth fingers of my left hand, where he had once made a cut, and to dance around the rock, doing exactly what I had done when I replanted the root of the devil's weed. He asked me if I remembered all that I had done at that time. I said I did. He emphasized that everything had to be just the same, and if I did not remember, I had to wait until everything was clear in my mind. He warned me with great urgency if I acted too quickly, without deliberation, I was going to get hurt. His last instruction was that I was to place the lizard with the sewed-up mouth on the ground and watch where she went, so that I could determine the outcome of the experience. He said I was not to take my eyes away from the lizard, even for an instant, because it was a common trick of lizards to distract one and then dash away. It was not quite dark yet. Don Juan looked at the sky. I will leave you alone, he said, and walked away. I followed all his instructions and then placed the lizards on the ground. The lizard stood motionless where I had put it. Then it looked at me and ran to the rocks toward the east and disappeared among them. I sat on the ground in front of the rock as though I were facing my plant. A profound sadness overtook me. I wondered about the lizard with its sewed-up mouth. I thought of its strange journey and how it looked at me before it ran away. It was a weird thought, an annoying projection. In my own way, I too was a lizard, undergoing another strange journey. My fate was, perhaps, only to see, at that moment, I felt that I would never be able to tell what I had seen. It was very dark by then. I could hardly see the rocks in front of me. I thought of Don Juan's words, the twilight, there's the crack between the worlds. After long hesitations, I began to follow the steps prescribed. The paste, though it looked like oatmeal, did not feel like oatmeal. It was very smooth and cold. It had a peculiar pungent smell. It produced a sensation of coolness on my skin and dried quickly. I rubbed my temples 11 times without noticing any effect. I tried very carefully to take account of any change in perception or mood, for I did not even know what to anticipate. As a matter of fact, I could not conceive of the nature of the experience and kept on searching for clues. The paste had dried up and scaled off my temples. I was about to rub some more on it when I realized I was sitting on my heels in Japanese fashion. I had been sitting cross-legged and did not recall changing positions. It took some time to fully realize that I was sitting on the floor in a sort of a cloister with high arches. I thought they were brick arches, but upon examining them, I saw they were stone. This transition was very difficult. It came so suddenly that I was not ready to follow. My perception of the elements of the vision was diffused, as if I were dreaming. Yet the components did not change. They remained steady, and I could stop alongside any of them and actually examine them. The vision was so clear and so real as the vision was not so clear and so real as the one induced by peyote. It had a misty character, an intensely pleasing pastel quality. I wondered whether I could get up or not, and the next thing I noticed was that I had moved. I was at the top of a stairway, and H, a friend of mine, was standing at the bottom. Her eyes were feverish. There was a mad glare in them. She laughed aloud with a sort of intensity that she was terrifying. She began coming up the stairs. I wanted to run away or take cover because she had been off a rocker once. That was a thought that came to my mind. I hid behind the column, and she went by me without looking. She's going on a long trip now was another thought that occurred to me then. And finally, the last thought I remembered was, she laughs every time she's ready to crack up. Suddenly, the scene became very clear. It was no longer like a dream. It was like an ordinary scene. But I seemed to be looking at it through a glass window. I tried to touch a column, but all I sensed was that I couldn't move, and yet I knew I could stay as long as I wanted, viewing the scene. I was in it, and yet I was not part of it. I experienced a barrage of rational thoughts and arguments. I was, so far as I could judge, in an ordinary state of sober consciousness. Every element belonged to the realm of my normal processes, and yet I knew that it was not an ordinary state. The scene changed abruptly. It was nighttime. I was in the hall of a building. The darkness inside the building made me aware that in the earlier scene, the sunlight had been beautifully clear, yet it had been so commonplace that I did not notice it at the time. As I looked further into the new vision, I saw a young man coming out of a room carrying a large knapsack on his shoulder. I did not know who he was, although I had seen him once or twice. He walked by me and went down the stairs. By then I had forgotten my apprehension, my rational dilemmas. Who's that guy, I thought? Why did I see him? The scene changed again, and I was watching the young man deface books. He glued some of the pages together. erased markings, and so on. Then I saw him arrange the books neatly in a wooden crate. There was a pile of crates. They were not in his room, but in a storage place. Other images came to my mind, but they were not clear. The scene became foggy, and I had a sensation of spinning. Don Juan shook me by the shoulders, and I woke up. He helped me to stand. We walked back to his house. It had been 3.5 hours from the moment I began rubbing the paste on my temples to the time I woke up. But the vision state could not have lasted more than 10 minutes. I had no ill effects whatsoever. I was just hungry and sleepy. Thursday, April 18th, 1963. Don Juan asked me last night to describe my recent experience, but I was too sleepy to talk about it. I could not concentrate. Today, as soon as I woke up, he asked me again, Who told you this girl H had been off a rocker, he asked, when I finished my story. Nobody. It was just one of the thoughts I had. Do you think they were your thoughts? I told him they were my thoughts, although I had no reason to think that H had been sick. They were strange thoughts. They seemed to pop up in my mind from nowhere. He looked at me inquisitively. I asked him if he did not believe me. He laughed and said that it was my routine to be careless with my acts. What did I do wrong, Don Juan? You should have listened to the lizards. How should I have listened? The little lizard on your shoulder was describing to you everything her sister was seeing. She was talking to you. She was telling you everything, and you paid no attention. Instead, you believed the lizard's words were your own thoughts. But they were my thoughts, Don Juan. They were not. That is the nature of this sorcery. Actually, the vision is to be listened to rather than looked at. The same thing happened to me. I was about to warn you when I remembered my benefactor had not warned me. Was your experience like mine, Don Juan? No, mine was a hellish journey. I nearly died. Why was it hellish? Maybe because the devil's weed did not like me, or because it was not clear about what I wanted. I was not clear about what I wanted to ask. Like you yesterday, I must have had that. You must have like you yesterday. You must have had that girl in mind when you asked the question about the books. I can't remember it. The lizards are never wrong. They take every thought as a question. The lizard came back and told you things about H. No one will ever be able to understand because not even you know what your thoughts were. How about the other vision I had? Your thoughts must have been steady when you asked that question. And that is the way this sorcery should be conducted, with clarity. Do you mean that the vision of the girl is not to be taken seriously? How can it be taken seriously if you don't know what the question the little lizards were answering? Would it be more clear to the lizards if one asked only one question? Yes, that would be clearer if you could hold one thought steadily. But what would happen? What would happen, Don Juan, if the one question was not a simple one? As long as your thought is steady and does not go into other thoughts, it is clear to the little lizards, and then their answer is clear to you. Can one ask more questions to the lizards as one goes along in the vision? No, the vision is to look at whatever the lizards are telling you. That is why I said it is a vision to hear more than a vision to see. That is why I asked you to deal with impersonal matters. Usually when the question is about people, your longing to touch them or talk to them is too strong, and the lizard will stop talking and the sorcery will be dispelled. You should know much more than you do now before trying to see things that concern you personally. Next time you must listen to them carefully. I am sure the lizards told you many, many things, but you were not listening. Friday, April 19th, 1963. What were all the things I ground What were all the things I ground for the paste on Juan? Seeds of the devil's weed and the weevils that live on the seeds. The measure is 1 handful of each. He cupped his right hand to show me how much. I asked him what would happen if one element was used by itself without the others. He said that such a procedure would only antagonize the devil's weed and the lizards. You must not antagonize the lizards, he said. For the next day during the late afternoon, you must return to the site of your plant. Speak to all the lizards and ask the 2 that helped you in the sorcery to come out again. Search all over until it is quite dark. If you can't find them, you must try it once more the next day. If you are strong, you will find both of them, and then you will have to eat them right there. You will be endowed forever with the capacity to see the unknown. You will never need to catch lizards again to practice the sorcery. They will live inside you from then on. What do I do if I find only one of them? If you find only one of them, you must let her go at the end of your search. If you find her the first day, don't keep her, hoping you will catch the other one the next day. That will only spoil your friendship with her. What happens if I can't find them at all? I think that would be the best thing for you. It implies that you must catch 2 lizards every time you want their help. But it also implies that you are free. What do you mean free? Free from being the slave to the devil's weed. If the lizards are to live inside you, the devil's weed will never let you go. Is that bad? Of course it is bad. She will cut you off from everything else. You will have to spend your life grooming her as an ally. She is possessive. Once she dominates you, there is only one way to go, her way. What if I find that the lizards are dead? If you find that one or both of them are dead, you must not attempt to do this sorcery for some time. Lay off for quite a while. I think this is all I need to tell you. What I have told you is the rule. Whenever you practice this sorcery by yourself, you must follow all the steps I have described while you sit in front of your plant. One more thing, you must not eat or drink until the sorcery is finished. End of chapter.